a tragedy, an outcome that no officer ever wants to see. We understand the gravity of this moment. The loss of Ms. Drew has reverberated throughout this department. I privately express my condolences to her family, and I want to publicly let them know that our thoughts and our prayers are with them as they go through this very difficult time. I thank Prosecutor Lucido and his staff for sending a strong message to those who decide to disregard the lawful commands of police officers and blatantly and egregiously endanger the lives of others. I want to make this perfectly clear. Anthony Greer killed Ms. Drew, and the entire community is thankful to Prosecutor Lucido for holding Mr. Greer accountable. Police pursuits are a polarizing topic. They're challenging because pursuits are among the most high-risk actions that officers can engage in. And like most major polarizing issues in this country, well-meaning and reasonable people can see this issue differently. Even within the field of law enforcement, accomplished law enforcement professionals across this country often disagree on the engagement principles with respect to police pursuits. For example, most police departments across this country allow pursuits to varying degrees. Some departments are more restrictive, while others allow more discretion by officers and supervisors. There are departments in Washington State, California, Oakland, California most notably, some departments in Florida who have loosened the restrictions on police pursuits. And the theme that we see consistently with those who are loosening restrictions are concerns about individuals committing crimes with what they feel is impunity in our communities. And then you have others in the Midwest and on the East Coast who have actually tightened restrictions on pursuits. And the common theme we see with those are that they are trying to have a balance between putting individuals and taking individuals off the street who are causing mayhem and destruction, and also the safety of those while we're engaged in those sorts of activities. And the point of all of this is that there really is no consensus on what the threshold should be for the initiation and the continuation of a police pursuit. It varies from municipality to municipality, from person to person, from law enforcement executive to law enforcement executive. And a difference in perspective on police pursuits does not mean that someone is necessarily right and someone is necessarily wrong. It just means that this is an extremely complex issue with nuance, and it requires an understanding of opposing perspectives. But regardless of where people lie on this spectrum and where they stand on this issue, everyone agrees that the decision to initiate a pursuit requires the utmost discretion and reasonableness based on a whole host of factors, with the safety of the community, particularly uninvolved persons, being the paramount concern. In the Warren Police Department, we allow our officers to initiate pursuits under certain conditions. We have a policy that gives clear expectations of officers during these pursuits. A policy, by the way, that has been vetted and approved through the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police accreditation process, a process that requires that all policies, including, of course, pursuit policies, are within best practices in the industry. The safety of innocent people is prioritized, and every officer and supervisor is expected to be well versed in this policy. Every pursuit, like Lieutenant Gajewski alluded to, is monitored in real time by a supervisor. It's reviewed afterwards by administration, and we want to ensure that there is compliance with our policies and procedures. Violations of our policy are subject to discipline based on the totality of the circumstances. We're a learning organization, so we review all of our pursuits, whether they are within, outside, or within the gray area of our policy. And if there are opportunities for adjustments in our policy, we take the opportunity to make those adjustments and modifications. And so, having said all that, here are my observations after a little over 5 months as police commissioner here in the city of Warren. And I'm aware of the perceptions. I'm aware that there is a perception that there is an increasing amount of pursuits within the city of Warren. I'm aware that there is a perception that our officers don't use the appropriate discretion with these pursuits. I am aware of the perception that the majority of our pursuits are out of policy. But here are the facts. Pursuits are actually down 50% year to date compared to this time period last year. Roughly half of those pursuits that have been initiated have been terminated by either the officer or supervisor. And the overwhelming majority of those pursuits were found to be within policy and procedure. So what that tells me is that we are clearly trending in a positive direction with respect to this high-risk activity. Are we where we want to be right now? I think that if you would ask our command officers and even our rank and file officers, they would probably say that there's improvement that can be made. But there's irrefutable data and evidence that shows that this city and this police department has made substantial strides in terms of addressing these issues with this very high-risk activity. But here's another observation that I've made. The amount of people who blatantly disregard the lawful commands of police officers and refuse to stop their vehicles is absolutely astonishing. For every police pursuit that we have, there is a suspect who has decided to use his or her vehicle as a weapon against innocent people in our communities. That, to me, is absolutely astonishing. There is work to be done at a lot of levels to address that. There are some legislative opportunities. There are, of course, some public service announcement and public information things that can be done. But the message has to be clearly sent that this is not a police problem. This is a people problem. People who have refused to comply with lawful orders. People who refuse to have a sanctity of life underlying philosophy when they are out in the streets. That has to be addressed. We will do our part. We will continue to train. We will continue to make our officers aware of some of the challenges with this extremely high-risk activity. We'll continue to trend in a positive direction with respect to what we're seeing with our officers internally. But this pursuit that we're talking about today remains under investigation, just like every other pursuit that we investigate and that we engage in. If there are violations of our policy, the appropriate corrective actions will be taken, including a training component if necessary. In this case, our officers, as Lieutenant Gajewski alluded to, used all of the tools available to attempt to stop this person from creating the carnage that he created. We used stop sticks. Intersections were blocked. We requested a state police helicopter. Mr. Greer consciously decided to continue. He consciously made a choice to expose the community to harm through his dangerous actions. Mr. Greer, as Prosecutor Lucido alluded, had every opportunity to stop his vehicle. Miss Drew lost her life because of his selfish and criminal behaviors. In closing, the clear and unequivocal message that we're sending to those who decide to commit crimes in the city of Warren is this. The Warren Police Department will continue to use every available resource and every reasonable and lawful tactic to track you down and bring you to justice. Departmentally, we're dedicated to employing all of the effective and responsible strategies for addressing this. And again, our condolences go out to the family of Ms. Drew and her friends and other loved ones that were impacted. Thank you, and we are available for any questions that you may have.
What speeds did the officers reach, and how long was the pursuit?
The pursuit was somewhere in the area of about 5 minutes. I don't have the exact speeds, but the speeds at certain points during the pursuit reached over 100 miles per hour. Yes, ma'am.
I know it's different every time, but at what point do officers decide, hey, I'm just going to call this off and let the suspect go?
And it's a tough decision. It's a in-the-moment decision. We give our officers and our supervisors a great deal of discretion with these pursuits. But with that discretion comes a great deal of training and a great deal of awareness as well about the potential risk to not only them but the public as well. And so it's a judgment call. But while our pursuits are occurring, they're being monitored by a supervisor in the station. They're being monitored by supervisors who are actually on the street as well. And also the officers have an obligation while they're engaged in the pursuits to be aware of some of the risk and make a judgment call at certain points during the pursuit if appropriate to call the pursuit off. And so it very much is a case-by-case basis. It's very difficult to get into the mind of a person, of our officers, although they're trained, they're professionals, but they're human. And when you have humans who are in high-stress situations, whose hearts are in the right place, they're trying to stop a person who's endangering the public. We've all seen stories recently of reckless drivers, in the Metro Detroit area who are engaged in these egregious acts that are endangering folks in our community. And folks in the community are telling law enforcement loud and clear that they want those sorts of things to be addressed. Now, there has to be some constraints, obviously. There are some guidelines that we have to abide by when we're addressing those. But I just say that to say that in the moment, we have to give our officers some latitude and some understanding when they're making these decisions out in the field. Yes, sir.
I apologize in advance. I don't need a Monday morning quarterback, so I just want to put that out there. But when it's a difficult topic as you've addressed. Mm-hmm. When you talk about we have a policy with clear expectations vetted by the chiefs of police, but then understandably it's an officer's call in the moment, it's the difficulty of the job. Mm-hmm. Appreciating you may not be able to line item what that policy is, how do you gauge whether or not this was conducted properly, as opposed to a layperson may think 100 miles per hour may be the cap, got to call it off? It doesn't seem like there's a hard and fast policy versus what an officer has to judge individually on a case-by-case basis.
So the
policy question is what I'm after.
Sure. And there are a couple of trains of thoughts with our policies, our pursuit policies. And as I mentioned before, when you have certain municipalities that have very restrictive policies, then it leaves hardly any discretion on the part of officers. That's one train of thought. You have other departments who have a less restrictive policy with respect to police pursuits. And those policies leave a great deal of discretion and latitude for the officers in the heat of the moment in making decisions on whether to initiate or continue a pursuit. So I think the way I'm taking your question, this really goes to why do some departments have a policy that clearly says that you can only chase for certain offenses and that's it, very, very restrictive? And why do you have other departments who have decided to have a policy that is a lot less restrictive? And it really is a it really, it's a case-by-case, municipality-by-municipality decision. Now, in the city of Warren, we do have a very comprehensive policy that grants a great deal of discretion to officers and supervisors. There's no bright line on, in most cases, on when a pursuit should be terminated or not. But there are a number of factors that we require our officers to consider when these pursuits are either initiated or continued. Some of those factors are as close to a bright line as you can get, and some leave some discretion. And so when we review these, we're looking at the actions of the officers in the context of the policy that we have in place. And with the discretion that they are allowed, would a reasonable officer, under those circumstances, with that type of policy that we have in place, under the conditions and circumstances that they were dealing with, would a reasonable officer conduct their actions and their tactics in the same way? It's not, there are no easy answers with it, but I will say, and I think this bears worth repeating, the policy that we have in place is a policy that has been vetted by the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police during their accreditation process. And when we go through this accreditation process, all of our policies are looked at, including, of course, our pursuit policy, to ensure that that policy, whatever it is, whether it's a more restrictive or a less restrictive policy, is that policy within best practices in law enforcement. And it was deemed that our policy is actually within the best practices in law enforcement right now. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner, can you talk about the officers who were involved and their status? Do we know how long they've been here, and are they on leave, or what is their situation?
So per policy, the officers are on administrative leave at this point while we conduct an internal investigation that we do with all of these sorts of incidents. So right now, those officers are on administrative leave. I'll have Lieutenant Gajewski get you the years of service that those individual officers have on the department.
And does it paid administrative leave?
Yes,
right
yes.
now? How many officers would you say?
Two officers. Yes, sir.
Will this case make you guys reconsider that policy?
Every pursuit. And that's what's, I wouldn't say unique about Warren, but it's certainly something that we're very, very proud of, and with respect to review of incidents like this. If it was a clear-cut in-policy pursuit, where there was no question whatsoever that we knew it was in policy, we still do a review. And even in those that are clear-cut within policy, there are some things that we find that we can do to improve or adjust or modify. This, of course, is one that we will conduct that same sort of review of. But we take every pursuit as an opportunity to see if there's room for improvement. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know, Commissioner, if this is, so far, I don't know how deep you are into the look of this, does it appear to be following procedure at this point?
Don't know. There are some things that we have to look at. We have to, there are some conditions with respect to decisions with speed and things like that we have to look at. I think the gentleman here asked what the speeds were with this pursuit, and when we have speeds that are over 100 miles per hour, then certainly that's something that gives us cause for concern. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's out of policy just because of that, but that's certainly a factor that we need to look at to see if it was appropriate. But we have not gotten through the internal review of this yet. Yes, sir.
Commissioner,
Mhm.
you had mentioned that pursuits in the city of Warren were down 50% compared to the same period last year. What exactly are those numbers, and what do you attribute to the decrease in the number of pursuits?
I don't have the exact numbers with me, but right now we're somewhere in the area of 60 pursuits, and it was roughly double that last year. I attribute this to officers and commanders and supervisors and administrators in the department really doing a deep dive and really being aware of some of the issues associated with pursuits, making sure that when we initiate a pursuit or continue a pursuit, that it's appropriate. That there's training involved in this. And so I think there's a general awareness within the department that there are opportunities, not just with pursuits, but with other things as well. That there are opportunities to improve in a lot of different areas, and this is an area where there may be an opportunity. So, yes.
I'd like to go back to policy real quick. My final question is, when we talk about clear expectations on policy, appreciating you can't necessarily give a line item, because offenders would then utilize that, but are there circumstances where warned police officers are told you cannot pursue?
Yes. Yes. There are some circumstances where it is not appropriate to pursue. So we don't have a policy that says that for every circumstances, no matter what, a pursuit is permissible. I mean, there's clearly some circumstances where there may be some other means of addressing the situation. So we have those things that are outlined within our policy.
My last question would be in regard to, we're asking officers to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
It's an impossible bar, but yet when we talk about these topics, you can't outright address them because then it would allow offenders more liberty. The balance of the fact that people's focus should be on the fact that the offenders are the ones still creating the situation.
Yeah. And that's what leads to a great deal of frustration with us. We're humans. We can give our officers the best training. They can have years and years of experience, and sometimes we may have human lapses. Sometimes. I mean, it's just a part of being human, but we have to take that into account when we're assessing officer behavior, when we're assessing tactics. It doesn't mean that simply because we're human we can make egregious mistakes. I mean, there are some consequences, and there have been some times when we have had to institute some discipline for not only pursuits but other things that have been outside of policy. And so I'm not standing here saying that every single time we engage in these sorts of high-risk actions that we do it absolutely right, absolutely every time. I mean, that's an unreasonable standard and an impossible standard for us to have for our officers. But when I look at these, I try to look at this from a holistic standpoint and from a human standpoint. What are we expecting of these professionals that we have? We give them a lot. Community says that they don't want folks recklessly driving and creating mayhem in our streets. So when we give the direction to our officers to address that, we've got to understand that they're going to address it as highly trained professionals, but they're human. That will occasionally make some mistakes. But what I will say, and I mentioned this in my remarks, is I am impressed with the fact that upon review of all of the pursuits that we've had, very few of those have been deemed to be outside of policy. And so we're talking the vast, overwhelming majority of pursuits that, by the way, are 50% lower than they were last year, but even the vast majority of those, we're finding that they're within the guidelines of a policy that has been vetted and approved through the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police. And so I think that is something that this city and that this police department can be proud of. Extremely challenging circumstances out there. We have folks who are concerned about law and order. You have folks who are fed up with individuals who feel that they can come into communities and commit crimes with impunity. You have people who are fed up with the idea that somebody can come and commit a crime in a city and simply drive away and not worry about any intervention with a police officer. People are legitimately concerned about that. And and they're asking us to address it. And we've got to be responsible. We've got to make sure we're professional. But when we're assessing the actions of our officers, we also have to be understanding. Yes, ma'am.